In 2025, I resigned from my company, a project that I worked on for probably more than 4 years. And I resigned out of frustration, disappointment, and sadness. But I could have never thought that that was maybe the best decision I could have ever taken. Many of the things that have happened over the last 3 to 5 years inside of me have been kept right there. So this brought me to figure out that by the moment I was done with my company and I had resigned, I had plenty of time, which I didn't have before. But then when everything stopped, there I was, left with nothing but my own beliefs, spirit, my passions and dreams, and problems, unresolved problems that were boiling up inside of me, waiting on the right occasion to come out and tell me how negligent I had been until then. So when I thought everything was absolutely perfect, I was there facing all my demons, all of them together, all my fears, all my sorrows and frustration, health issues at the same time, in the same place. And when the bad came out, when the body, the soul, the mind started talking about their struggles, everything that I had inside of me, I guess, blew up and led me to having gastritis, insomnia, even worse than before, stress through the roof, anxiety, panic attacks. I've come to realize that one of the most frightening things I have seen is just the inability to comprehend what's going on with you, especially when things go sideways. And so to an extent, one could say, well, it might be that lack of awareness. It's like, I don't know what's going on really. And I know I am trying to kind of figure that out, but the inability to make that happen, I think is really the thing that makes everything worse. Because it's like, I'm really trying to make sense of all of this and it's really not working. It really doesn't get any worse than that, because you feel like you want the answers. You feel like perhaps in that moment you are entitled to your answers. You have to do with your body, your mind, and your life. But you're there stranded in the middle of this internal highway that kind of paves the road inside of your mind, body, and soul to just a destination of mystery, uncertainty, darkness as well. That is probably one of the darkest places I have seen in my life. Deep in my heart, I already had the belief and the feeling that my real journey was probably far away from that reality. The real reason why I'm saying these things is because when you see things unfold the way I saw them in 2025, at least the beginning of 2025, thinking perhaps this is going to be another big year of change, important decisions, sacrifices. But nevertheless, all those situations will get me to something better, a better place, a better space, better relationships. When you begin with that belief, when you start things off with that concept in mind, but then things turn quickly around on you, at that point you just become so uncertain of everything that is going on around you. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and when you look at the grand scheme of things and you have a lot of stuff planned out, you expect to mitigate any possible risk, issue, or unexpected event in the usual way you do it. And my argument here is that sometimes that is quite impossible to do. Even though I am a strong believer that the word impossible doesn't have nearly as much power as people give it to it. But one thing is for sure, the future is ever-changing and extremely, undoubtedly unpredictable. You want to know as much as you can. You want to be as curious as you can get. You want to learn, you want to read, you want to listen as much as you can, as many times as needed, so you can get better within a certain domain or across multiple ones. And even though you may or may not be that person, my argument is that you'd still be presented with circumstances in life that will make you fall, and you will fall for a reason. In 2025, I fell, and I fell personally and professionally. I did resign, that is true, but I did it thinking I will enable my next idea. I will pursue whatever else my mind is just kind of working on. And as I said, when I finally made that decision to resign from this 8-figure business we had built, which financially I didn't have any reasons to, but when I did, it just felt liberating. It just felt freeing. And when you feel that, you're just like, okay, now I can reshape the world in the best way I know. It is really important, I believe, that we feel free to really give purpose and meaning to something. And so when you gain that degree of freedom, it's almost like hitting reset. And so going from that feeling to now, even though my mind is good to go, is ready for another good race, and then feeling that you're not able to uphold those responsibilities or dreams, I think that is quite something. In my case, I carried on me for a long time a lot of stress, insomnia, especially over the last 18 months. A lot of stress, insomnia, anxiety. Before resigning from my company, I didn't have many panic attacks. That was something that kind of came out when I was just enjoying my free time to an extent. That kind of came out later on. But the one thing that I could never expect was that my health, every emotion that I've mentioned, they all have gathered up in my body. And turns out each and every one of us has ways to explore, process those emotions within our bodies, inside our tissues, organs. And it seems like that's something that happened to me as well. So much so that I developed a chronic gastritis, which I didn't know I had until July of last year, 2025. I couldn't possibly fathom that, you know, from a little stress or little anxiety or insomnia, whatever, I could get to the point that a few months later, I wasn't even able to have 100 grams of rice. Plain, unseasoned, white rice. That was kind of the tipping point for me. But going back to how everything started, my body was absorbing all the stress, anxiety, the worries, the frustration, the fighting emotions inside of me was absorbing all of that. But as everything in our life, it kind of came to a point that there was a real limit. And so the way I read it is that everything inside kind of started like blowing up, said in the simplest way possible. And once that happens, it's just like your mind now is not worried anymore about, you know, I gotta get this done, I gotta do that, I need to make this many calls, I need to send this many emails. It's not like that, because once I removed that from my body and mind's perspective, I would call it distraction. When I removed that distraction, my body and mind were finally able to look inwards and say, oh damn, things are really, really shitty right now. And well, when that happens, it's like you start feeling it, like you start hearing the noise. And to an extent, it's not even just noise, it's just a lot of things blowing up at the same time. A little like sitting on a chair, doing nothing but staring at the flowers, and all of a sudden you get hit by a panic attack, and yeah, you're just like tearing up, crawling on the floor, and you don't know what's going on. And I feel like a lot of people might be in similar situations. Then it's like, I'm just gonna go see my doctor, and you know, they're gonna patch me up and fix me up, whatever. And everything is gonna be fine. I'm gonna be back on track in a couple of weeks, and that's gonna be it. But what I found out, which is actually quite interesting and terrifying as well, I should say, is that with emotions, with stress, and with everything that is kind of boiling up into your body, it's not really like that, because at that point it's just, you don't know how long you need to kind of process a certain emotion that might have gotten stuck in a part of your body. It sounds quite complex if I put it that way. And the fact that I lived through that and I'm still on my healing journey, and it's January 1st, 2026. So it's been probably a year just kind of discovering, exploring, and fighting, thriving against these obstacles, these opponents, where they are external or internal. Most of them, I would argue, are inside of us. Most of them, or the majority of them, are parts of our body, places in our mind that we really can't label, name, understand, comprehend, be aware of. I think those are the really big obstacles we neglect and we just underestimate, saying, yeah, it's just this, or it's just that. I'm just gonna be, taking a couple of pills, slip through that, and tomorrow's gonna be a new day. And I thought that was true as well. But when it comes to those things, those emotions that get tangled inside of us and get really sticky, in that case, we really don't have that many choices. And sure, you can take pills, you can see a lot of professionals, you can see a lot of doctors, and you can get a lot of opinions, which, by the way, I did too. But I believe everything boils down to simple steps. Because the truth, as far as I could tell, for my case, is within us. What I mean by that is that very often we can try to patch things up. We can try to fix them up in a way that perhaps makes us feel better momentarily. Perhaps gives us like a few days of peace and a few, weeks perhaps, or months of just calm and quiet. But at some point, I feel like we're gonna get to that stage where, I can patch it up as many times as I want to, but the problem is still gonna be there. So all of this to say, 2025 was a year marked by a lot of fear, anxiety, stress, panic attacks, and overall physical illness. I got chronic gastritis and duodenitis, then lost a bunch of weight. I lost probably 25 pounds in less than 6 months, which is pretty insane. At least for me. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that. I've always been very careful with my diet. I'd always tried to stick to a pretty healthy diet. So sleeping and eating well, I should say, are definitely a great combo to a lot of good things in life. That is for sure. So going from that to really not being able, which is what happened actually, not only lost 25 pounds of weight, but got to the point that I was feeling so bloated, so full, so nauseated all the time, and I'd get these stomach aches, this puke feeling, that food wasn't this great experience any longer. I've always been really passionate about food, but going from that abundance of everything, just kind of food variety, flavors, textures, and all those things, going from that to the plainness of just kind of white rice and oats for a very long time, it's a tough moment. It's a really tough one. It really hits you where you think you can't really be hit, because we take it for granted. At least I did. I did take for granted. For granted the fact that, it's like, man, my stomach's just gonna be always there. It's just gonna be reliable as it always has been, and it'll never betray me unless I do betray him first because of carelessness and, negligence, which I think to an extent we all do, and we all do that to our body, and that happens quite often. But this sequence of events, it's just like a combination of situations. Just like you get stripped of everything you hold dear and near to your life, and when you face these situations. And it's not only about like losing weight and having a little gastritis, but now it's food. Now you lose one of the biggest and most important chunks of your day life in general, like food. You're pretty much stripped away of that, and then you're underweight, and your immune system starts getting all wrecked. And now you're pretty much always sick, always sad, tired, exhausted, with a lot of mental fog, tiredness. Your body is not answering to you any longer. And well, you thought, I'm the master of my destiny. I can control this, I can control everything. And all of a sudden from this, I don't want to call it obsession, but probably in my case it was obsession, control obsession, to really not being able to control anything at all. It's just such a mental shock. It's just, you are there at the wheel and all of a sudden you get thrown out of the car. And you're like, I don't even know where am I right now. And I don't even know what I'm doing. So, I mean, I think that says a lot. That says a lot, and I feel like for a lot of people, it's, I mean, at least for me it is quite complicated, because it's like going from cloud 9 to rock bottom in a matter of a few weeks, maybe like a couple of months. It's quite rough, that one. And so how do you fix those things? How do you make sure that if something like that happens to you, you can kind of muster up all the energy you got and puzzle things up back together? Well, in my case, and I'm still working on that, by the way, I feel like I'm almost fully recovered, which I don't want to even jinx it, but I trust my body and I trust the awareness I've developed as far as my body goes over the last 12 months. But how do you really fix those things, and how do you really go about it? It's like, do I see a doctor? Do I just do it myself and figure something out? Well, the best way to do it is to, in my opinion at least, I'm no professional. I have no medical experience, and I can speak only from my personal experience. But from what I've seen, it is really important to break things down to the smallest nuance. You want to make sure you really understand the basics. You really want to make sure that before you just kind of embark this crazy, I don't know, 1,000 doctors appointments or 1,000 supplements or whatever journey, you want to make sure that you really increase your awareness. Obviously, if you're feeling sick, you should probably go and see a doctor. If you're not feeling well, I guess, that's the only thing you can do right there on the spot. But what I'm trying to say is, over the long run, instead of like patching things up as fast as you can for as long as you are able to, you probably want to increase your awareness, your space awareness and your internal awareness, I call it. And when I say internal awareness, what do I mean by that? I mean that you want to understand what's going on inside of you. So what worked for me in this case is like, I started to an extent journaling everything. I started like doing this crazy journaling journey. And I'm not talking about, writing a couple of sentences here and there whenever I could. I'm talking about really putting my mind and thoughts and soul, body, putting everything, all of that into a page I could read. Whether that be a piece of paper or your notes on your phone, I think it doesn't really matter. It's more about just making sure you can actually follow the internal thinking process of your mind. It's almost like when we type something into ChatGPT and then you start seeing ChatGPT saying thinking. And so when you click on thinking, you will see the thoughts flowing into the answer, into what's going to be the answer later on. So you kind of look at this thoughts flow and you see like where the AI is where it's bouncing. So thinks A and then goes from A to B and then figures out that from A to B everything was right, but then he jumped to D instead of C. And so you see that the AI thinks about that misstep and it just goes back to C. And so now it's doing A, B, C, D. And so it goes from A to B, from B to C, and from C to D. And so you follow these all back and forth that the AI does with his internal algorithms as it thinks and it figures things out and makes mistakes along the way. And I feel like that kind of resembles a little bit like the way our brain works. And one problem I see with us, with human beings, is, and because it was a problem for me, that is for sure, is that we really avoid looking at that. We avoid it as much as we can. And why do I use the word avoid? Because sometimes there are thoughts that are just like these little sparks in our brain that are telling us something. It's just like listen, something that is supposed to catch our attention. It's almost like this ring bell we have inside of us. And so I am quite sure that if there is noise that we need to be aware of, or we need to kind of perceive to an extent, there is a reason. And what I'm trying to say here is very simple, because maybe our brain or our body or both are trying to tell us something. And what I think is true is that quite often, very frequently I should say, either we don't know how to interpret that, and I was there too, in that group of people. Second, we catch that noise, that's this kind of noise in the air, and we try to kind of give it a sense to it. Then we're like, never mind, it's just like, it's a waste of time, just fucking thoughts, who cares? And third one is like, we stop, perhaps, we give some time to that noise that we are hearing, that we're feeling, and we just actually try and act upon that and try and give it a little bit of meaning. And I do understand that that step is quite hard and complex, and very often it's like, oh, I try really to make sense of that, and I really stopped right there, and I did my best to just give it as much time as I could, but it didn't make sense and it was a waste of time. And I think that could be the case too sometimes, but I feel like it is really important to puzzle up all those cues, all those breadcrumb trails, because perhaps if we do it once or twice, it's not gonna make much sense. But if we really start getting aware, space aware of what's going on with this thought, with thought A, B, and C, at that point we feel like, okay, maybe A didn't make sense at all on its own. But then when I coupled it with B and C, or let's say just B or just C, it did ring a bell. And so when someone starts like really building that mental map through multiple tools, in this case with the help of, could be with the help of journaling, or having like notes, or writing down thoughts and just like sketching out, or like using like maps, I don't know, like anything that works for you. But the more you do that, the more you make sure that you give sense, you give meaning to what's going on inside of your body, the more those things will give you cues on how to answer your problems. I'm not saying you should over obsess about everything, every piece of information or every little noise in your mind or your body, by all means. But one thing that you probably want to do is you want to take the dive and go inside of your body and understand what is going on. It could be a symptom, it could be ache, it could be pain, it could be soreness, it could be just like a lot of emotions stuck in your body, and a lot of like conflicting situations that for some reason got trapped somewhere in your mind or body, and we can't really get them out of there. And like I said, I'm not saying everything that happens in life and sickness and so on and so forth is this blurry gray area of emotions stuck in our body or whatever. I'm not trying to make things up, but one thing is for sure, whether that be depression, anxiety, frustration, panic attacks, any kind of sorrow, the first step is you want to understand what's going on. Make it make sense. That's the first thing. Make it make sense, and make sure that no matter what it is, you follow that kind of trail. Kind of follow it. At least you try your best to do it. So, because I feel as much as we think it's not worth it, on that trail, we will find the answers. Very often, I believe we are so focused on the outside. What happens in the world. The past, the present, the future, and the physical dynamics that kind of move things around in the world we live in. But I have found that myself first, and many others I would believe, are so stuck, or were so stuck in that loop of action, that they wouldn't really pay attention to the other realm of things, which is the inner part of our body. That could really be described as a whole new world of sorts. It's just like a new place, a new reality, a new realm of things. And as we do for the world we live in, I feel like it would make a lot of sense to ask questions about that, understand the way of things inside of our body, and increase our awareness as far as that goes, so that we are not only more aware as human beings, but we can actually connect better with our body and mind, which I believe is where we all keep like our memories, good things, bad things, and everything else. It's way more than a storage unit, if you ask me. And I believe that what's beneath the surface is way more interesting, way more deep than anything we have seen before. But one thing is for sure, I did the doctors, the supplements, the meditation, the strolls, the me time, the journaling, and every other thing you can mention. When I was in a place where even like a good night's sleep was golden for me, was priceless. A good night's sleep was priceless. And being able to eat a little more than 100-gram rice portion was an absolute blast for me. It was just like a reason to cheer up and celebrate. So if I was in that place and I tried everything that I could and saw little to no improvement, but then slowly, everything kind of compounded, especially the right decisions. And you may ask, but how do I know if I'm making the right decision or not? Well, you don't. That's a problem. But one thing is for sure, the more you ask questions, the more you'll be given answers. And you won't always ask the right questions. That's the deal. But the more you ask questions, the higher is the likelihood that you're going to ask the right questions. And the more right questions you ask, the more you can hope that the answers will be correct and will help you give meaning and make sense of whatever you're dealing with.